Hi guys, this is Vineet, and in this video we will discuss about backup and restore strategies. And before we proceed ahead, I would like you guys to go ahead and please subscribe to my channel and hit on the bell icon to get all the notification. Select the all option during this while hitting the bell icon. Select the all option. Now let's go back to a topic which is backup and restore strategies. Let's go to notes. So we will discuss about few backup and restore strategies that we should follow. A reliable use of backup and restore for recovery required a backup and restore strategy. So why do we need a backup and restore strategy? So that we can reliably take backups and reliably perform restores for our databases. And we need to balances the business requirements for maximum data availability and minimum data loss while considering the cost of maintaining and storing backups. So basically here we are discussing about what are the uses of backup and restore strategy and why one backup and restore strategy should be developed. The first use is that it provides us a reliable way to backup and performing backup and restores for whatever recovery is required. And it also helps us in balancing the business requirement for maximum data availability and minimum data loss while considering the cost of maintaining and storing the backups as well. And strategy also contains the backup portion and the restore portion, so there are strategies for both the backup portions and the restore portions. And the backup part of the strategy, the backup portion of the strategy defines the not defined defines the type and frequency of backup. So how often we should take backups, and that's defined by the backup strategy, the nature and the speed of hardware that is required for them. So in the backup strategy all these items are considered, where we consider the frequency of backup, the nature of backups, and the speed of hardware that is required for them, and how we need to store our backups, whether it has to be stored on site or off site. That is also is defined under the backup strategy, and where and how backup media is to be stored. How backup media has to be stored. And let's talk about the other part of the backup strategy, which is a talk about other part of a strategy actually, which is a restore strategy. The restore part of a strategy, it defines who is responsible for performing restores. So the name of person is written under that strategy, or the name of team responsible for performing restore is written under that strategy. And how restore should be performed to meet the goals for a database availability. So all the steps are listed over there, how exactly restores have to be performed and who will perform the restores. That can minimize the data loss, and how restores have to be tested on a test server. And basically making a strategy requires a careful planning, implementation and testing as well. So testing is required for any of the strategies that you're creating. You do not have a backup strategy until you have restored the backups in all the combinations. So testing should be done. We should restore a set of backups on a test server, so testing should be done. That what makes our backup and restore strategy effective. So what we should do, we should first try to restore the backups in the test environment that are included in your restore strategy, and tested the restore database for physical consistency. We will talk about each of these steps later in more granular way. And let's talk about few of the factors that have to be considered while making a backup and restore strategy. So what should we should consider the goal of our organization regarding the production databases, like requirement for their availability and protection of data from loss or damage. So our organization should define certain goals in the backup strategy. How much data loss can be suffered, or no sort of loss can be suffered, that should be defined. And we should define the nature of database, its size, its usage pattern, and the nature of its content, and the requirements of its data, and so on. And we should also define the constraints on resources like the hardware resources, personal space for storing backup media. So we should discuss about constraint as well. So how much hardware do we have, how much personnel do we have, how much space is required for storing backup media, we should also discuss about the physical security of a stored media in our backup and restore strategy. So let's move on to the next topic. So backup and restore strategy is done. Now let's talk about some of the best practices that can be followed in order to do backup and restores. So let's talk about best practices here. So we should always use a separate storage. So database backup must be placed on a separate physical location or device from the database file. So database backup should not be stored at the same location where production databases are there, or I mean the site should be different as well. So physical location should be different altogether wherever we are taking the databases. And we should select the appropriate recovery model. So there is a recovery model tied to a particular database, so that recovery model should be selected appropriately as per our situation. Now let's talk certain points under choosing the appropriate recovery model. Backup and restore operations occur within the context of a recovery model. So our backup and restore operations are dependent on the recovery model. So let me show you where do you see this recovery model. I've opened SQL, it will open in a while. So let me get back to you once it opens up. Thank you. So SQL Server is open. Let me try to log in into this and show you where we select the recovery model for our database. So I'm waiting for it to populate the chart on the left hand side. So expand our databases section. Here we will see so for example, let's talk about Northwind database. Let's look at its properties. So let me see if the recovery model is present over here. Let me check. So under the options section you will see a recovery model which is set to simple. Other options are full and bulk log. So right now this database is set to simple recovery model. Alright, so basically the goal was to show you where you can find the recovery model for your database, and the backup and restore operations occur within the context of the recovery model. A recovery model is basically a database property that controls how transaction log is managed. So ours is simple recovery model for a Northwind database. So it basically controls how transaction log is getting managed. And recovery model of a database determines what type of backup and restore scenarios are supported for that database, and what's the size of the transaction log backups would be. And typically a simple recovery model or a full recovery model is used. So basically if we talk about this, so let's open up properties and go to options. So there are two options. We are talking about full and simple recovery models here. So the documentation is saying that typically we use a simple recovery model or a full recovery model. And the full recovery model can be changed to bulk log recovery model before bulk operations. So if we are performing any bulk operations within the tables in our database, so database recovery model should be changed to bulk log before we perform any bulk log operations. And recovery model selection depends upon the business requirements, and to avoid the transaction log management and simplify the backup and restore, so basically if we use the simple recovery model, we basically avoid the transaction log management and simplify the backup and restore process. And to minimize the work loss and cost of administrative overhead, we use the full recovery model. So if we don't want any work to be lost, we should use full recovery model. Otherwise simple recovery model can be used. because simple recovery model involves the administrative overhead as well, because we need to load the transaction log separately apart from restoring the database backup, full database backup. So little bit of administrative overhead is involved with the recovery model. So full recovery model, this cost of administrative overhead is less, and we lose minimal work. There is a minimal work loss, so no work loss. And to minimize the impact on log size during the bulk log operations, while at the same time allowing for rediscoverability of those operations, we use the bulk log recovery model. So basically, bulk log model is used to minimize the impact on the log size during the bulk logged operations, and at the same time allowing the recoverability of those operations, we use the bulk log model. Now let's talk about the backup strategy design. We were talking about backup and restore strategy a few minutes back, and now we are talking about the backup strategy design. So after your recovery model is finalized, whether it's simple, full or bulk locked, once it is finalized as per the business requirement for a specific database, we have to plan and implementing a corresponding backup strategy. So first we finalize the recovery model, then we plan and implement a corresponding backup strategy. And optimal backup strategy depends upon the variety of factors. So here we are discussing about the factors we should consider while designing a backup plan or backup strategy. So first factor we should consider is how many hours a day do application have access to database. So how much time the database is getting used. So how many hours in a day your database is getting used, and if there is an off-peak period where database is not getting used or getting less used. If there is an off-peak period, recommendation is to do a full database backup during that period. So if there is an off-peak period when the database is not getting used, we recommend basically to do a full backup of that period, for that period, in that period, we can say. So, and second factor is how frequent is the changes and updates likely to occur. If changes are frequent, consider the following. Under the simple recovery model, if your database is set to simple recovery model, consider scheduling differential backups between full database backups. So a differential backup captures only the changes since the last full database backup. So if we have a frequent changes to our databases and the model being used is a simple recovery model, we should also consider taking the differential backups between the full backups. Alright, and if we are using full recovery model, we should schedule frequent transaction log backups as well. Scheduling differential backups between full backups can reduce restore time by reducing the number of log backups you have to restore after restoring the databases, restoring the data. So even if we are using the full recovery model, we should schedule the differential backups, and in addition to that, you should also schedule frequent transaction log backups as well. So depending upon the number of differential log backups we have, that reduce the number of transaction log backup needed for restoring. And third factor to consider is are there any changes likely to occur only to a small section of a database or in a large part of the database. For a large database and where the changes are concentrated in a part of a database or files, partial backups or file backups can be useful. And fourth factor to consider is how much disk space will a full database backup require. So we should determine that as well by formulating the backup strategy. And how far in the past does the business require to maintain backups? So how much long back we need the data, so that helps us in letting us know how long do we have to keep for how far in the past we have to maintain the backups. we need to make sure the proper backup schedule is established according to the needs of the application and business requirements. And while formulating the backup strategy, next we consider is the size estimation of the full database backup. And this is the step which we are talking about. So we estimate the size of the full database backup, where the estimation of a disk space of a full database backup should be done before implementing a backup and restore strategy. So first space is calculated. We use this system stored procedure which I will show you in a while to determine the size of the database backup. And here we are talking about a backup which only contains the actual data in a database and not the unused space. Therefore the backup file size is usually less than the database itself. So let's go ahead and use this stored procedure against the Northwind database. So the stored procedure is sp space used, which is tells us about the space being used by the database. So I've just triggered a new query. So let's type that and execute the query. So it gives us details about the database. So this is Northwind database size is 80 megabytes and unallocated space is 1.51 MB, which is a free space. So if we take backup of this database, the size of the database file will be approximately 80 MB. So that's how you see you can estimate the size of the backup file. So 80 MB is the size of the file. Here you see 648 KB or 66 MB is reserved. Okay, that talks about the reserved space. But yeah, the database size is 80 MB, so approximately you can take a guess that it requires at least like 80 MB size the backup. And now let's talk about backup scheduling, which is a part of backup strategy. A SQL Server backup with minimal effect on the production workloads. So backup should be taken at a time when production workload is not there, and regular backup should be scheduled as part of database maintenance plans, and there should be a backup testing strategy as well. So you do not have a restore strategy unless you have tested your backup. So that backup testing is a part of restore strategy. So we do not have a restore strategy unless we have tested our backups, and it is important to test your backup strategy for each of your databases by storing a copy of a database onto a test system. So testing should be done by restoring a backup copy into a test system, and you must test restoring every type of backup that you intend to use. And it is also recommended that once you restore the backup, you should check for database consistency via the dbcc checktb command to validate the backup media was not damaged. So consistency should be checked for the database after it is restored. Next factor to consider while formulating a backup and restore strategy is media stability and consistency. Advanced feature can be used such as backup checksum, which can be used to detect problems with the backup media itself. And similarly, restore verify only option can be used to do verification while restoring the database. So both this backup checksum and restore verify option can be used to ensure the media stability and consistency. And next part is the documentation. Everything should be documented. Your backup and restore strategy should be well documented, and we should document our backup and restore procedure. And operation manual should be maintained for each database, and document should tell the location of the backups, backup device names, and the amount of time that is required to restore the test backups. So here we are done with the backup strategy, and let's see how much time we are done by now. So it's almost like 19 minutes. Even I think we are wrapping up over here. In our next video we will talk about the Azure Blob Storage. So we are finishing here, and in today's video we have discussed about backup and restore strategy. and the best practices associated with that, those backup and restore strategies. So I hope you liked this video. Please guys, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. So there is a subscribe button at the bottom. You can hit